What's up, JEFusion fans? This is Philip and welcome back to another video. So at this point in Kamen Rider Revise, the power of Kamen Rider Demons had been transferred from Hiromi Kadota to Ortega, and actually I have here Kamen Rider Demons Sodo just to illustrate that. So that actually gave me an idea for this video, which is going to be about Kamen Rider powers, suits, or systems that had multiple users. So, before I begin, I actually understand that if I talk about everything in full detail, this video is going to be very long. So, I've decided to split this into basically three parts. Now, we're going to start with the early Heisei era, which is from Kuga to Decade, the excuse me, the later or the Neo Heisei era, and then the Reiwa period. Now, we're not going to include Showa because obviously uh, all those rider shows in the Showa era had only one rider, or in the case of the original Kamen Rider, we had two, and Rider Man basically was the secondary rider in Kamen Rider V3, but they basically, stayed with the main users. So again, there were no instances of the powers basically being passed around. So yeah, we're going to focus only on the Heisei era onwards. Now, I also would like to establish a few rules here. So number one, it must only, of course, considering that we're talking about multiple users here, so the same suit or the same rider power should be used by at least two people. So of course there are rider systems that had more users than you could probably count, but at least two. So the second rule that I am going to establish here is that it should only be in the TV continuity. Now, no movies or spin-offs, no novels or whatnot. So anything that we can consider as non-canon will be non-canon. So a third rule that I would like to clarify just in case. So there are instances where characters receive rider powers from another person, from a previous user, but they add some changes to it. A good example of that would be Storius from Kamen Rider Saber, who took the omnibus from Master Logos, who was also called Kamen Rider Solomon, and changed the omnibus to and turn it into the Grimoire. So when he used it, Kamen Rider Storius became a different rider altogether. So again, if a rider falls into that category, he or she is not going to count into this, or he or she is not going to be counted in this video. And number four, no alternate universe versions. So Kamen Rider Decades riders are already out the window in this case. So just to be clear, okay? So again, if you've mentioned anyone from Kamen Rider Decade, you're out. So again, considering that this video could be very, very long, if I probably won't be able to mention anything or everything rather, or everyone involved. So if there's anyone or anything that I missed, please do leave in the comments below. So let's get started. Now, with the early Heisei era, we're going to skip Kuga because it's a solo rider show. So everything revolves around the Yusuke Godai. We know he's Kamen Rider Kuga, and there's no other rider, or more importantly, no other user for the Kuga than him. So we can already skip that. Now, we start with Kamen Rider Agito, which is basically the first rider in the franchise, or the first rider show in the franchise, to introduce a multitude of Kamen Riders. So not just like double riders, but more. Now, the very first example of this multiple rider thing that we're going to talk about is, of course, Kamen Rider G3. Now, uh, particularly the G3X. So there was one point when Makoto Hikawa, aka the main user that we normally associate with the G3 and the G3X system. So he was basically relieved of his duties, and the responsibility of being Kamen Rider G3X was transferred to Toru Hojo. Now, the original G3 suit was still operational, so it was passed to Takahiro Omuro, which again makes the G3 or G3X basically the first rider suit to be passed from one person to another, albeit temporary, but it happened. So next, let's move on to Kamen Rider Ryuki. Now, the most prominent example that we have here is Kamen Rider Zolda. Now, for Kamen Rider Zolda, we of course normally associate it with Shuichi Kitaoka. However, there was one point that he fooled everyone into thinking that it was his assistant Goro who was Kamen Rider Zolda, and he gave his deck to Goro, again, make fooling Shinji and then into thinking that again Goro was Zolda. However, later on in the series, well, Shuichi Kitaoka never actually got to see the end of the rider battle because he died of sickness. And with that, Goro actually took the role of Kamen Rider Zolda to fight instead, for in place of his boss. So he does officially become Kamen Rider Zolda, albeit again temporary because he was defeated quickly by Kamen Rider Oja. So now we move on to Kamen Rider Phis. Now, uh, you know, come to think about it, all of the belts that were seen in the show had multiple users. Now, Phis alone had been used by at least 4 people as far as I can remember. So, of course, the main user is Takumi Inui. So, some users that I do remember. So, Yuji Kiba, at one point, Naoya Kaido was Phis. So, the Centipede Orphanoch, I forgot his name, but the actor was also the same person who played Toru Hojo in Kamen Rider Agito. And yeah, even Kusaka Masato. So actually, there were 5 users of the Phis system. Masato Kusaka, if you wanted to be an English, naming system. So, anyways, so yeah, Kamen Rider Phis alone already had 5 users. So the Kaiser belt was, of course, mainly used by Masato, but in at one point, so it was taken from him by the Lobster Orphanoch, so that Lady Orphanoch. And then the next one we see is the Delta Gear, so Kamen Rider Delta, which was initially used by Kitazaki, aka the Dragon Orphanoch, and was passed around, with several users, especially from the Ryusei school. I forgot the name of the girl who used it. Primarily, it was at one point used by Takumi Inui, aka Kamen Rider Phis. So it was eventually given to Mihara, so he became the prominent user of the Delta Gear going forward until the end of the show. I forgot Mihara's first name, so again, anything I missed, please do tell me in the comments. This is going to be a long video, So, anyways, let's move on. Now, Kamen Rider Blade. Now, I guess for the multiple riders, we do have the Liangle buckle being passed around. There was one point where it was used by different people. So mainly, of course, we have Mutsuki Kamijo as the primary user. I forgot the name of the person who was able to control the effects of the spider undead, because they were basically like-minded. So again, if you remember the name of the person, please do tell me in the comments. Again, I tried my research, but uh, you know uh, I can't memorize everything and everyone at once. So at least there were two. Probably Kotaro, aka the guy who helps out Kenzaki and the rest of the riders. So he almost became Kamen Rider Liangle when, but Kenzaki stopped it, and well, we can also put Kenzaki as an honorable Liangle in that regard, because when he stopped Kotaro, we saw the suit kind of form around Kenzaki, but it kind of got canceled because he wasn't really wearing the belt. So again, he just did that to stop Kotaro from transforming into Liangle. But yeah, that's basically what happened. Now, the next case, so uh, I was actually planning to do a research on Hibiki, but actually, there were no multiple writers there, so we can skip that. Uh, again, there is a moment when Asumu Adachi became Kamen Rider Hibiki, but that's only in the Hyper Battle video, so that's not counted. Okay, so we can skip and scratch that as well. Now, Kamen Rider Kabuto. So it had basically uh, Kamen Rider the B as the system that had the most users in the show. Now, there was a time that, of course, it was in the hands of Soyaguruma, who was basically the most prominent user of the system. But when he was removed from Zek, it was passed on to Shun Kageyama. And after Shun Kageyama, there was actually a point when uh, Arata Kagami became Kamen Rider the B, but it left him, or the Zector left him, when he failed to defeat Kabuto because he didn't want to. So apparently, you have to be very loyal to Zect in order to use it. Now, the last time that we see Kamen Rider the B being used was by Masato Mishima, uh, was basically a high-ranking officer of Zect, who forcibly used Kamen Rider the B Zector and transformed into Kamen Rider the B. So it was only a one-time transformation, but the 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 Zector also left him because, again, he wasn't chosen, but he was able to fight anyway. So another interesting aspect of that is, so the actor for Masato Mishima was the same character as Goro from, or the same actor rather, as Goro from Kamen Rider Ryuki. So yeah, that's again another interesting fact. Now we go on. So Den-O, I'm not really sure if we can count multiple users here, because everything that happens with Den-O when it comes to, again, like for example, Kamen Rider Decade and spin-offs like Pretty Den-O. So uh, we don't really count that because uh, the main reason is uh, Takeru Sato, when he left the franchise, so when he decided to say goodbye to Den-O, the role of Kamen Rider Den-O basically fell to Momotaro's instead. So again, it does not really count because in the original TV run of the show, there were no multiple users of the Deno system, not even the Zeronos system. So yeah, we can skip that. And Kamen Rider Kiba, so we do have the Ixa system. Now, Kamen Rider Ixa's main users are basically Keisuke Nago in the present time or the 2008 timeline, and uh, I forgot his name. Otoya Kurenai. So I almost blanked out there. So yeah, Otoya Kurenai, who was again uh, Kamen Rider Ixa. So again, this video is long, so my memory doesn't really last so much. So uh, so they were the basically the main users of the Ixa system. However, in their however, in their respective timelines, there were also other users of the Ixa system. So let's go to 1986 first. So of course, like I've said, Otoya Kurenai was the main user, but the next user was Jiro, aka the or aka Garuru. So he was an Ixa user at one point, and then Yuri Aso became Kamen Rider Ixa, although again she transformed once. Now in the 2008 timeline, so again we have Keisuke Nago, and then at one point we have the Spider uh, Fangire stealing the Ixa system, and he transformed into Kamen Rider Ixa. So when there also came a time when Kengo Eritate became Kamen Rider Ixa. So he came back from his injury, like becoming edgier, and again he became Ixa, like I said. So there was also one point when Megumi Aso also became Kamen Rider Ixa. So again, Kamen Rider Ixa basically was the most passed down uh, belt or rider system in the show. Although we could actually count the Kamen Rider Kiva itself, because, or I'm not sure. So because in the final episode, Wataru Kurenai's son so comes from the future and becomes Kamen Rider Kiva. However, again, this becomes something questionable because we basically see Kiva Bat the third, or some was it the fourth? So there was basically another Kivat in the future that allows the transformation into Kamen Rider Kiva at that point. So again, that's in a gray area. So Kamen Rider decade, we're going to skip that again. It's an alternate universe altogether. So I guess if we do focus on the original writers for the show, so Decade and the End, now there was at one point when the DN driver was stolen. In fact, it was in the Shinkenger world. So it was some sort of a Chimatsuri type uh, monster. So someone like Dokoku, so transforming again into Kamen Rider the End, or at least a corrupted version of it. So I guess we can scratch that because, like I've said, there shouldn't be any changes. So yeah, Kamen Rider Decade in general, yep, skipped. So yeah, those are basically some instances. Like I've said, uh, there were so many things that we're going to talk about. So this video is basically going to be 20 minutes of that, and we're just in the early half of the Heisei era. So in the next video, we are going to look at more Kamen Riders with multiple users. Again, starting from Kamen Rider Double until Kamen Rider Geo. So again, the later half of the Heisei era, aka Neo Heisei. So please make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Comment. So if you think I missed anything or you want to clarify some things in this video, so of course, don't forget to share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get the latest from JEFusion. So again, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you know when part 2 comes out. Okay, so again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.